White?
Yes. Item I1 is a public hearing to review the districting process for city council elections and receive public input regarding the composition of potential city council districts. And we have about 10 speakers for this item.
On September 11th, 2019, as you all know, the city received a demand letter from attorney Scott Rafferty, which threatened legal action against the city under the Federal and California Voting Rights Act if the city does not transition from at-large to district-based elections of city council members. At its October 22nd, 2019 meeting, the council adopted a resolution of intention to consider transitioning from at-large to district-based elections for members of the City Council. The adoption of the resolution of intention was the first step the city needed to take in order to utilize the legislative safe harbor to avoid litigation and to cap attorney's fees that a plaintiff challenging Richmond's election system could be entitled to recover at $30,000. The next step in the safe harbor process is for the City Council to hold at least 2 public hearings over a period of 30 days, at which time the public is invited to provide input regarding the composition of the proposed council districts. Under state law, these public hearings are required to occur prior to the drawing of a draft map or maps of the proposed boundaries of the district. Tonight's public hearing will be the first of 2 public hearings required to be held regarding the composition of city council districts. The public hearing will include a presentation from Shalise Tilton, a representative from National Demographics, the group providing demographic services relating to the drawing of the districts. We will see a preview of the online interactive systems that will allow the public to draw and submit proposed districting plans for the City Council's consideration.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and Council members. As Mr. Asencia mentioned, my name is Shalise Tilton. I'm a senior consultant with National Demographics Corporation. You'll hear us refer to the name of our firm as NDC. I just want to give you a quick overview of how we got here, and then we'll get quickly into what the process entails. So the California Voting Rights Act is found in Election Code 14025. It's a safeguard law that prevents against election systems that dilute the voting strength of a protected class group. So there, the CVRA is what it's often referred to, and you'll hear that often. It applies to at-large election systems, which is what the City of Richmond has. An at-large election system is a system where voters of the entire jurisdiction elect members of the governing board. So that's what presently exists today. Just wanted to point out there are some cities that have from district systems or resident district systems, and that's a system where the candidates are required to live within certain boundaries, but again, the entire jurisdiction elects the governing board. For purposes of the CVRA, they consider both at-large and from district as the same thing. So from district is also considered at-large, or if you have a combination. So say you had 3 districts where 3 were elected by district and 3 were elected at-large, that would be a combination system, and the CVRA would consider that to be an at-large system. So at-large systems would be subject to a lawsuit under the CVRA. The only remedy that provides absolute protection against a future CVRA lawsuit is a by-district system. So that is where the entire jurisdiction would be divided into 6 equal districts, and there would be 1 council member residing in each of the districts, and only those voters residing in the district would vote for that council member. The California Voting Rights Act was written specifically to encourage at-large cities to transition to by-district systems. The CVRA was fashioned after the Federal Voting Rights Act. However, it removed some of the requirements or some of the conditions that had to exist in order to bring a lawsuit. So they took the Federal Voting Rights Act and they actually lessened the requirement, so it's easier to file a lawsuit under the CVRA than it is under the Federal Voting Rights Act. So for the Federal Voting Rights Act, there had to be some standards that had to be met before you could file a lawsuit, that being you needed to determine that a protected class could constitute a majority and that there had to be, under the totality of circumstances, indications that there has been a race factor involved. Those two tests were taken away. Now the only test that must exist is if there is racially polarized voting. So that's if a protected class votes as a block, and if the voters who are not in the protected class vote differently to defeat the choices of the protected class. This is a very low bar for determining if racially polarized voting exists. And for that reason, there have been many jurisdictions that have been facing legal challenges. Most have reached settlements, legal settlements, and you can see even on the right-hand side we're showing most of those are all settlements except for the first two. They actually did go to trial on the first two. You can see the dollar amounts that were being spent by these jurisdictions just to quickly settle a case. In all cases, there has not been a jurisdiction that has been successful in challenging a CVRA challenge. So most recently, and I'm sure you've read that Santa Monica just lost their case. Then the plaintiff is requesting $22 million. Santa Monica is appealing the case, so they will be spending more money and the plaintiff will be incurring additional costs. The plaintiff's attorney has incurred 13,000 billable hours. The rate of the attorney's charging is somewhere between $500 and $975 per hour. And the court and the judge in the Santa Clara case determined that $975 per hour was reasonable because it's special litigation. So it does not look good for cities in challenging these. No one has been successful. I will point out that since the CVRA has gone into effect, before the CVRA became effective, there were only 29 cities that were by district. Now we have, I believe that number is 149. So roughly 40% of the cities over 10,000 in population have converted, are now by district. So that's exactly 33% of those cities over 10,000 are by district. As was mentioned, there's a process for us converting by district, and the reason why that process is in place is for the very reason that I just showed on the previous slide. The legislature in 2016 realized that all of this tax dollars were being spent on these legal cases that oftentimes settled very quickly into the process, and they're paying millions of dollars and still being forced to convert their election systems. So in 2016, the legislature passed a law that would allow cities the opportunity to voluntarily switch after receiving a demand letter. So if the cities voluntarily switch and go through the process within a prescribed amount of time, then a potential plaintiff would only be able to recover expenses up to $30,000. So rather than paying millions of dollars and end up with converting from at-large to by district, if you agree to complete the process within a certain prescribed time, then your liability is limited to $30,000. So we are in the first of two public hearings. The purpose of this public hearing, and the first two public hearings are a little bit frustrating because during these public hearings we can't look at maps, but what we're here for is to get input from the City Council and from the public on how you'd like to see those maps drawn. And then after these first two public hearings are held, then we will be receiving maps from the public. The City Council has made the decision to offer all tools available for the public to be able to draw and submit their own maps. NDC will take each map that is submitted and professionally draw it up and complete demographic summary for each of the maps so that the council can weigh all the maps equally. We don't weed out any of the maps. Any map that's submitted is produced by us and presented to the council, and it's in a public forum at the third public hearing. Those that submit by the deadline of November 21st, that is. So the first time you'll be considering maps will be December 3rd, and then you'll have a second public hearing on December 17th to consider the maps, with the final adoption taking place in January. In creating the maps, there are both federal laws and state laws that we must follow. I mentioned the CVRA law, but also we need to be mindful of the Federal Voting Rights Act and federal laws that are in place. One of those laws, and this is sometimes frustrating, is that we must have equal population, but we must use the 2010 census data. So the data will be old. Some of the population, you'll have some population changes in the last 10 years, but we must use that data. The frustrating part of that is in 2020 there'll be a new census and we'll have to be readjusting the boundaries so that they are population balanced. When we're talking about population balance, this is total people. Citizens, non-citizens, babies, people of all ages. So just for the purposes of drawing the boundaries and making sure they're balanced, that we use total people. The state law also requires that we are mindful when we're drawing the boundaries that we do not dilute the voting strength of a protected class. So it's very important that when we're drawing these maps, we respect neighborhoods, especially neighborhoods of concentration of underrepresented groups. However, on the flip side of that, we cannot draw a map, we cannot draw a district that is solely based on race. So it's important that we do be mindful of the neighborhoods and the composition of the neighborhoods when we are drawing the maps. On the right side of the screen are traditional districting principles and redistricting principles that are used. We do have new legislation that is in place. You'll often hear AB 849. AB 849 doesn't go into effect until January 1st, 2020. However, the city will not be adopting its map until January 1st, 2020. Within AB 849 does two things. One, it establishes a series of steps that need to be taken when you're redistricting, so when you're adjusting after the next census and you're adjusting your boundaries. It also sets forth the criteria to be used in drawing the boundaries. So they are very similar to those listed here. Excuse me. Sorry, there's no cough button here. There are similar criteria that are listed here on the page. Thank you. In AB 849, they established in order of priority. So the first priority being that the districts must be contiguous. So you cannot have a section of District 1, a section of be here, here, here. They all must be contiguous. Second priority is respecting communities of interest and respecting the geographical integrity of local neighborhoods. And shared neighborhoods that have shared economic or social concerns should be included in a single district. The third would be to follow visible, natural, and artificial or man-made boundaries wherever possible. The fourth would be compactness, so that the districts are compact as possible. And then there are other guiding principles that the City Council can choose to include when they are considering the maps, and I'll be going over those in the next slide. Respect the voters' wishes and continuity of office. If we're able to meet all of the criteria set forth and draw a district that avoids pairing two council members in one district, sometimes it's just a matter of moving a line just here a few streets over, then we'll try to present that option, and I'll tell you why. In some cases, it would be possible for me to draw a map that had maybe 4 council members drawn in one district. The message I would be sending to the public is it doesn't matter if you believe all 4 have earned re-election because they're drawn in one district, the voters would only be able to re-elect 1. So whenever it's possible, we like to respect the voters' wishes and leave it up to the voters to determine who has earned re-election and who has not earned re-election. For each of the maps, we'll be providing demographic summaries of each of the maps and each of the districts within the maps. So each map will be accompanied by a data sheet that will have 6 columns, one for each of the 6 districts, that will include all of this information. This information is useful when you're analyzing the maps, so you can see how good of a job the maps have done at respecting neighborhoods. When the courts look at how good of a job you've done at not diluting the voting strength of a protected class, they'll look at the citizen voting age population as opposed to total population. So you'll often see that indicated as CVAP, citizen voting age population. It's the second category down on this chart. I know it's very small. You can't see that likely from where you are. But the courts will look at the percentage of how well you've done at respecting neighborhoods, and you should see a higher concentration of certain underrepresented groups in certain districts. So it's useful when comparing the maps. If you see one map that's a way outlier, for example, if you're able to accomplish districts that have, a high percentage, and then one map has a very low percentage of a district that the highest district of a single protected class group, then it would be a good reason to look at that map and see if those boundaries do respect the neighborhood and keep it undivided. Other factors that are often looked at when you're determining a community of interest is language spoken at home, homeowners versus renters, multi-family housing versus single-family dwellings, immigration status, age, all those types of things help define your communities of interest and will help you when determining if the map has done a good job at respecting those neighborhoods. We do provide some tools to help the public in determining where the protected class groups reside. So this is a color-coded map, and you'll see that the lighter colors, and this is based on the citizen voting age population. So this is a map that indicates the concentrated areas of the Latino populations, Latino voters, mostly concentrated between San Pablo and 580. This is a similar map of the African American voters. They're particularly concentrated in the Hilltop, in the Iron Triangle, and between Ohio Avenue and I-580. And your Asian American voters are concentrated around the Country Club and Hilltop Village in the north, in the hills of El Sobrante in the east, and along the border with El Cerrito in the south. And then your white citizen voting age population, your white voters are particularly concentrated along the water, south of 580 and along the border of El Cerrito and in the hills. So for the purposes of this public hearing, we're hoping to get some indication from you of there are particular neighborhoods that should be kept together. Sometimes there are neighborhoods that are actually located very close to one another, but perhaps they are so different they should be drawn in a separate district, or certain boundaries that make sense as far as where boundaries should be. Those are the types of things that we're hoping to hear from in this public hearing. And then sometimes it makes sense for a particular area to have multiple representation. I can show you some maps. Actually, these two maps just show highly compact maps. You'll see that they aren't perfect lines, and there's reasons for that. One, we have to population balance. So we can't have perfectly, in the case of Compton, draw perfect 4 squares because the population balance is not evenly distributed. Also, we have to follow the geography of the census blocks. So the federal government draws census blocks, and then they count the population within the census block. We need to follow the geography that they have used. So in some cases, you have some very odd-shaped census blocks, and when we draw our maps, we have to follow those borders. So you sometimes get frustrated when you're using the tools, particularly because you want a certain line drawn a certain place, and the toolkit will automatically move it. It's moving it to align with what the federal government says the census block is. A census block is similar to what if you had a perfectly square city, it would be like, running around the block is what you consider. These are some maps where the the governing board, the city council, or the school district board has given guidance saying that we want some other, in addition to respecting the communities of interest and the criteria we talked about, let's look at maps that also have some other principles or other goals. In the case of Pasadena, Colorado Boulevard, most of us have watched the Rose Parade. Rose Parade goes down Colorado Boulevard. But at one time it was in need of redevelopment, dire need of redevelopment. And it was the time when they were doing districts. And so they felt that it was important that each of the districts touch Colorado Boulevard so that each council member would feel accountable and have a stake in how that was developed. Some felt that that is one of the reasons for the success of Colorado Boulevard today. In South Pasadena, they chose to have districts that had a good variety of each of the neighborhood types. So they did more vertical lines so that each would represent a variety of the neighborhood types. And then in Fresno, at Central Unified School District, they wanted each district to have a little bit of the rural area and a little bit of the urban area. So you can see it kind of fans out from the urban area out to the agriculture area. And these are perfectly acceptable guidelines for you to, and direction for you to give us when we are drawing the maps. We've also identified some other maps that are useful and are available on the district elections website, where the zoning districts are, the neighborhood councils, fire response areas, school, other things that we can do. We have an interactive map viewer. We can overlay various things such as school attendance zones. As I said, the council has made the decision to offer the public all the public drawing tools that are available. This is a snapshot of the 3 tools that are available, and I'll be going through them. The first one is a one-page mapping kit. So what we've done here is we've taken census blocks and grouped them into larger population units. This way it has a population count in each of these units, and someone can just draw and do the math themselves. So each district would have to have roughly 17,284 people in each district. And it says so on the map. I know it's small, but this is a map that if someone who's not computer savvy just wants to draw a map, they can pick one up from the city clerk's office and just draw the map and submit it. Accompanied with this, with the paper map, you can use an Excel tool if you wanted to do the calculations yourself to see where your concentration of, say, your citizen voting age population, and also to double check your total population balance. There's an Excel toolkit that accompanies the paper map. And there are instructions on how to use the Excel kit. So it's worth it if you already know Excel. It's probably not worth it if you need to learn Excel from the beginning. But these toolkits are available on the website, and they're basically just to help you with math and help you to see how you're doing with your citizen voting age population. And then there's the online tool that's available. There are tutorials that are available, and what you can do here is you bring up the map and you actually draw your districts. So a template will come up, and then you just highlight the areas and say, okay, I want this area in District 1. You assign it to District 1, and it will give you the population count to see how you're doing, as well as population and the citizen voting age population. It's a little bit more complicated and a little bit cumbersome because they wrote this software back in 2010 and have not updated it because California is the only state that does mid-census map drawing. But we're hoping to get a better version of it after the census comes out in 2021. But for our purposes now, we're stuck with this one. But once you get the hang of it, it's kind of fun to use. And oftentimes we'll see one person submit 3 or 4 maps, or even more maps. We like to ask people to draw the maps and then select your top 2 or 3 to submit if you want to submit more than one, because if you can't decide on your favorites, it's going to be difficult for the council to decide which one is its favorite. So go ahead and draw as many maps as you'd like, and then if you could pare it down to the ones you like the best. And also it's useful if you give a description as to why you prefer a map. So there's YouTube tutorials, and there's one-page tutorials on how to use this software. This concludes my portion of the presentation. So again, we're here to find out any input from you on how to draw the maps, as far as what communities of interest should be included in the maps, if neighborhoods should be kept together, If there are certain areas that should have multiple representation, such as waterfronts or downtowns, those type of areas, and what other factors we should consider when we're drafting the maps. And if there's any questions about the tools or anything else about the process, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Any questions from council members so far?
Yeah. I'm a little bit confused. This is supposed to be about protecting special protected classes, but what I'm hearing from you is that it's about maintaining neighborhoods and not about race. Am I correct, or can you explain that to me?
Well, if sometimes you would have a city where where the residents it's very diverse, so you don't have concentrated areas of a particular protected class. But if there are, and we did do some of those color-coded maps, and we did identify some areas where you have some concentration of some protected class voters. So in that case, we do need to be mindful not to draw a map that would dilute that voting strength. So you wouldn't want to, say, separate a very highly concentrated area. That's federal law.
Okay, so it's about getting parity on the city council, and from the maps that I've seen, it seems like it will be giving 3 seats to whites, and 1 seat to Hispanics, and 2 seats to African Americans, and our demographics are far from that. So can you explain how that is establishing parity?
Well, the maps you're referring to have not been drawn by us or the city. You may be referring to maps that the plaintiff's attorney may have prepared, but we have not prepared any of those maps. You are correct. The most important factor is drawing maps that match your community and respecting those neighborhoods.
Okay, so is Mr. Riff Rafferty here?
He is.
He is? Okay, I was looking at his document, for lack of a better word. I was looking at his document, and it seems to be rifled with misconceptions and actually misapplied. I mean, it's illogical, and so I'm wondering whether our lawyers have taken the time to examine this fully to see exactly how many holes it has.
Well, we reviewed the document, and I think we've given you our assessment of at least the legal arguments that are made. As far as the maps are concerned, you know, we're treating Mr. Rafferty as any other member of the public that wants to participate in this process, and we're going to, you know, receive his map and put it in with all the other maps, and it's ultimately going to be up to the council to decide which map reflects, you know, the correct process that reflects the city's demographics.
Okay, and generally when we ask for outside help, it comes before the city council, and we have a chance to examine them, but this seemed to have just fell on us, and we had no choice but to vote for it. Are there other organizations who do this sort of work?
What work are you referring to specifically?
The job of demographics and drawing up the maps.
There are other organizations. You might recall at the last meeting, we recommended, with our advice of our outside counsel, this organization, and then the council authorized us to enter into an agreement with this organization.
And how was the outside counsel chosen? How was the outside counsel chosen?
The outside counsel was chosen, I believe, we were in closed session, and staff or the council authorized our office to retain outside counsel to assist in reviewing reviewing Mr. Rafferty's letter for the validity of his claims and helping to illuminate our path going forward.
Okay, so basically, you're saying that the city council give you carte blanche to do it?
That's not what I said, no.
No? Well, then, can you tell me what you said?
There were specific actions that were discussed in closed session and one of them was authorizing us to seek outside counsel that was familiar with the subject matter and to retain them in order to provide an additional opinion as to the validity of Mr. Rafferty's arguments.
Okay, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I'll have more questions later. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Councilor Willis?
I just needed to get some clarity because when we first talked about this, there was a lot that came up. One of the things that I wanted to revisit is that when this letter was put forward to us, we were told that we needed 6 districts and a mayor. Is there a possibility to do 3 districts with 2 council members representing each district? Yes, no, and why? Yes, no, or why, yeah.
You could do that, but you would still be open to a CVRA lawsuit, and you would likely, the plaintiff's attorney would likely proceed with a lawsuit because that would be considered an at-large district. You have to have single member districts.
Okay.
So only 1 member per district.
All right, yeah. I want to get clear on that because I heard we couldn't do it, but I wanted a little bit more detail, so thank you. The other question I had, because we're entering this new realm on how our electoral system is going to look, is there a possibility through this process to implement ranked choice voting along with district elections as well? Are they similar? Can we do it, or is that a separate matter altogether?
With ranked choice voting, and I can just quickly give a explanation of what ranked choice voting is. So if you had 3 people, 3 seats that were up, and you had 6 people running, the voter would go and rank all 6 candidates, 1 through 6. For the first round, all of the voters' first choices would be counted. The candidate who received the least votes was in last place. Those voters who supported that last place candidate, they would move to their second choice and reallocate those to the candidates, and would keep doing that until you get the top 3. Mm-hmm. So that's a ranked choice voting. Also, there is cumulative voting, where if there were 3 seats up, each voter would have 3 votes. You could cast all 3 for one candidate. Either cumulative voting or ranked choice voting does not provide immunity from a future CVRA lawsuit. It could possibly satisfy the plaintiff. It could possibly satisfy and resolve this particular lawsuit, but it may not protect you from a future lawsuit. Those cities, there are 3 cities that have ranked choice voting. Oakland, Berkeley, San Leandro. There may be another one I'm not thinking of. San Francisco, of course. But they also have districts. So they have districts, and then within the districts, they have ranked choice voting.
Yeah. Just to be clear, I wasn't under the assumption that this would protect us from a further lawsuit. I was just saying because we're in this process of going from at-large to districting, if we could also, during this process, consider implementing ranked choice voting as part of the electoral system moving forward. I know it's been an interest over the years but never been talked about, but I guess there's never a better opportunity to talk about it than now when we're talking about how our electoral system is going to work moving forward. So just to be clear, I knew we weren't, that was going to save us from exposure.
There are some other obstacles, and that is certification of voting systems, and if the county could handle ranked choice voting. So that's another obstacle. And also, it may take a charter revision to be able to put language in there for the basis for certifying the ranked choice voting. So there are other obstacles in addition to expense. So even those counties that say they're able to do it, they also include a caveat that it would cost you more to run a ranked choice voting election if their equipment was able to do it, and if the Secretary of State certified that equipment for such purpose.
And if Contra Costa County was able to handle it too, correct?
Right.
So
Or otherwise,
essentially-
you'd be conducting your own election.
Yeah, so essentially, item that needs to be studied further. All right, thank you so much.
Councilmember Johnson.
Well, thank you for your presentation. I had a question about the online tool that you spoke about. Can that be found on your website?
It's on the city's website. I believe it's already live on the website.
Live.
Yeah.
And if it's
So-
not live, we will confirm that it is by tomorrow morning. We have
Yeah,
the
it may be.
links, and we've received this in the past
Yeah, I know
days,
it was
so-
just completed, so
Right.
it may, but there are links, there will be links on the website to all of the tools and the tutorials for how to use them.
Okay. And my second question next year is an election season, and for those running for re-election, if we're going into districts for their 2020 election cycle, how would that work for them? For example, if I was in the same district as another council member and I was running for re-election and they weren't, how would that work?
Okay, so no council member's term will be cut short, so it actually takes 2 election cycles for your whole system to be perfected. So if you were up in 2020 and you were paired in a district who's with another council member whose term was up in 2022, then you would both continue to reside, to serve on the council. On 2020, you would run, and if your district was assigned to a 2020 election year, you would be eligible to run for that 2020 seat.
Okay, any other questions from council
And
members?
however, if you're a
I was gonna
district.
say, hold
yeah,
on.
Councilmember
If you're,
Bates.
yeah.
I
It
was
gets
with you
more
for a minute.
complicated, so, if you're.
I need to follow up on that one. So just to be clear, the 2020 candidate would be able to run, but then the 2022 candidate would have to wait until the seat is up again, or how would that work?
There has been no case law on this, and I don't know if your attorney has an opinion on this, but there have been jurisdictions, say, if we go back to the scenario of, we have a district, it's been assigned an election year of 2022, or 2020, I'm sorry. So it's assigned, the district itself is assigned election year of 2020. There are 2 council members in that district. One is 2020 and one is 2022. There are many jurisdictions that believe both council members in that case would be eligible to run for that 2020 seat, and the 2022 would vacate their 2022 seat if they were successful. Now, conversely, however,
Councilmember-
if it were assigned to a 2022 year and your seat was up in 2020, you would have to sit out for 2 years.
Yeah. Councilmember Bates.
We gotta fix your district right, Mr. Johnson. Well, let me just give an opinion. I mean, I think this is terrible. We live in a democracy that we've been preached through civic classes and everything all our lives about democracy. And all of a sudden, Mr. Rafferty comes up with this genius idea from wherever, I don't know where it come from. Richmond, there's no respect for what Richmond has represented. Over the past 30-some years I've been on the council, we've always had a diversity. African Americans, Latino, Koreans, whites. I mean, we've always had that kind of diversity. And as elected officials, all of us, when people call us, we don't ask them where they live. If they have a problem, we listen to the problem and we address it. So this representation, all of a sudden, is out the window. Mr. Rafferty's got other ideas. Now, my question has to do with who determines, who even proposes the boundaries that we're about to embark upon? Does this council appoint a committee, Does Mr. Rafferty take it up on himself to tell us what to do all the way? I mean, what is the procedure and the process of determining what districts we eventually going to recommend or vote upon?
That's a good question. So as your consultant, we'll be providing some options for you. We'll usually prepare about 3 maps for you to consider. That will be in addition to all the public maps that are submitted and Mr. Rafferty's map. So you will have all those maps from the 3 or however many NDC prepares. We usually see what maps come in, and then we prepare whatever options we don't see submitted. So if there's some configurations we don't see that are represented in any of the maps, we'll draw that map for the council to
Well, where are you
consider.
getting your committee's input from the speakers who come here, or do we provide maybe 1 or 2 individuals to work with you? What's the procedure?
So typically, we are getting these from this public hearing, and state law is set up that way, so it's a very public process. So members of the public can come and speak and say, I'd like to see this in a district, and also the city council tonight, and at the next public hearing, can give us ideas of how you'd like the boundaries drawn.
Well, we already starting with the problem. If you expect to have accurate information from people who come here, you're looking at the wrong solution. There are communities out there in the community like North Richmond, Hilltop, the neighborhood councils who have a better grasp of what their feelings may be. And you're going to listen to the people who are gadflies that come to the council meeting all the time. You're not getting accurate information.
And hopefully we can get those neighborhood associations and neighborhood councils involved, and they will submit maps. That we typically see that, it's just getting the word to them that we'd like them to participate and submit maps.
Now, what is the possibility? I don't know. I'm just asking. If this council chose a place on the ballot in November 2020, asking our voters if they want district elections. Now, I've always, again, felt that the democratic process is the will of the people that prevail. Are you telling me that if there's an overwhelming opposition to district elections, that we continue forced to proceed with district elections?
I can tell you there have been cases when they did put it to the vote of the people didn't vote for it, and the lawsuit proceeded, and the city was forced to move to by districts, so against the voters' wishes.
Is there a Supreme Court challenge to that?
No.
You can't, if 75% of the people vote to abolish and not proceed with district election, you mean to tell me we don't have an opportunity to go to the Supreme Court and...
Oh, you could always have that opportunity. It's just, for many jurisdictions, it's a budgeting issue. So if you choose to fight, you're going to need to allocate $1 to $2 million just initially to challenge one of these lawsuits.
I don't know what it's worth it, Mr. Mayor, but I'd like to see it on the ballot. I'd like to see our resident make a determination.
Okay, at this time, I'll open the public hearing. Would you call the public speakers, Madam Clerk?
The first group of public speakers are
Did you
Andre
want-
Soto.
Okay, I'm sorry. That's all right. The
I'm used to being ignored.
thing's not working real well
No,
tonight.
that's fine. I wanted to first let everybody know, thank you for coming out here to our city council meetings. We really appreciate seeing you all and enjoy hearing your opinions. Secondly, I actually wanted to thank you as the first and only elected Asian American city council member that you actually use the term Asian American, because Mr. Rafferty was rather enamored of white-Asian. I actually had to tell my wife a couple of weeks ago that all this time she's been married to a white-Asian man. So I really appreciate. But once again, it does bring up an interesting conundrum, because even though Asian Americans make up a pretty sizable part of the population of Richmond, arguably about 14%. It doesn't seem under the rules of districting, because they're not concentrated in any given areas, that it's likely that they will ever have a majority Asian district. So is that a correct analysis?
Lawsuit.
I mean, that's really surprising me because 14% is actually a very high number. I mean, if you think about it, the African American population of the United States is about 13%. So, I think most of us up here have been pretty vocal about stating that this is not fair, this is not right. It's rather silly to argue so, but it looks like we don't have, based on the interpretation of the law, very much leeway here. So enough said about it, I guess. But thank you again for your presentation.
Okay, now it's called public speakers.
Our first group of speakers are Andre Soto, Susan Worley, Kevin Matthew, Lisa Johnson, Joseph Pulio, Scott Rafferty, and David Drisdell. Please come forward. Andre Soto.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Una pregunta para el consejero Nat Bates. Si uno habla español y si te llamas, ¿cómo responde? Mr. Bates, I asked you a question.
You're wasting your time asking
Okay.
that question.
So, the essence of the question is that
Wait, let's not do dialogue, okay? You can speak and
okay. I hope I get my time back
use your
after
time
the
up and
interruption.
sit down, please.
Yeah, I hope I get my time back for that interruption. The bottom line here is that Latinos are underrepresented and have been underrepresented for a number of years on the city council. I'm not sure that this process is actually going to get us there, but I do support district elections in principle. Now, what I do have a problem about this is a single source contract, no bid contract for national demographics, when we have public resources such as the Haas Center and the Institute for Governmental Studies, both at UC Berkeley. Institute of Governmental Studies is the center of the redistricting databases and processes and all these things that is a public resource, in addition to the Haas Center, who's worked in this community for more than a decade and has the demographic maps already together. So I think that moving forward, you ought to not hire these people and work with public entities. And I think also the fact that you're only going to have 2 public meetings. What are you going to do? Provide a translator? That's not going to be fair. What you need to do is go and have a separate public hearing with the Latino community in one of their facilities in the community, not here in City Hall, and ensure that that community is allowed to participate equally and fairly in this process. And I think that short of that, it's going to be another one of these dog and pony shows where the attorney gets paid, the contractors get paid, and then we get screwed again. Thank you.
Susan Worley.
Good evening. I'm Susan Worley, and I've lived in Richmond for 31 years. I can't wait to see the coloring book about this. And I sort of get the feeling that maybe we don't really have a voice in this. And I'm wondering if other municipalities and groups have challenged this, and if so, if we couldn't, join together and challenge as a block. I also think that, just because a lawyer who apparently has nothing else to do with his time but go around and make trouble, has brought this forward, I don't see why we can't get a better lawyer. And, it just seems like so much foolishness to me. I wanted to come tonight to say that I'm against district elections because I think what we have works. The only problem I have with all of you sitting here is I'd like to see some women here as well. But I think that demographically, you guys look like what we look like. Also, when I saw the map up there, I'm trying to decide whether I should be a proud Latina at this point, or perhaps I'm African American. I'm not sure. You don't maybe know what neighborhood I live in, but my neighborhood is very diverse, and I don't see how my neighborhood could be, you know, how anybody would be able to say what my neighborhood is, because we racially, ethnically, religiously, age-wise, we have a really wide variety of folks. And I think asking us to pigeonhole ourselves is a problem. I'm not sure if we would even have a say in this. It kind of sounds like it would be census data that would be looked at. But I remember quite a few years ago, I was a teacher for 30 years in this district, and I remember one year we were told to tell, I know, Demis, it's good to see you. One year we were told to tell the, the school district what ethnicities the students were in my classroom. I cannot look at someone and tell you who that person is, and I don't think anybody should look at me and necessarily know. I actually my family came from two different backgrounds. My father was an immigrant, and you don't necessarily know who I am. I'm going through an Irish stage with red hair, but that's not my natural color. So I think that asking people to identify ourselves, our neighbors. I know so many people who live in family situations where they have more than one ethnicity under the roof, so I don't see how we can be asked to do this. But I actually think I'm all for challenging this, and I'm all for saying that we need to see what other people have done, and let's get one really good lawyer and wipe out Mr. Rafferty, who I know is sitting behind us, and give him something else to do with his time. Maybe buy him some tennis rackets or something. Anyway, I'm hoping that we do have some way to challenge this. It seems really manipulative. And this is not a public hearing. This is a small group. There are about 45 people here. Thank you.
Kevin Matthew.
Well, I'm really curious for a map of where all our council members live. Obviously, some of you would be endangered by district elections. That's some of your questions. I realize where a few of you live. I'm pretty sure none of you guys are up at Hilltop, last I checked at least, which would be a district. So there is that possible advantage that we'd have a voice up there. And of course, we do have some of the highest voting rates up there, as I recall from a previous election. But transparency. So we know who we're electing and where they're based. Yes, I could look up the websites of all you guys and so on and find that out. But I think pro and con. I'm not going to say somebody's better just because they're in Hilltop that will represent me and city issues. My dad grew up in the Triangle, etc. And I think it's unfortunate that we may need to be shoved to. For legal issues to this district elections. But I really think if there's any way, if we have to do it, let's do it so it doesn't start till after the new census. I think it's total BS that we would be using old, crappy, bad data. Okay? Let's use our science. Let's do some math. Let's do it right. Okay? Shove it down the road as it properly should be. And also make it transparent of where you all are at so we have a better understanding. I mean, yeah, the districts haven't been defined and so on. That's my thoughts offhand, and I know there's a lot more to figure out about this. Thank you.
Lisa Johnson.
Good evening. So I think regarding district elections, it's no secret that Richmond's in dire need of financial revenue and jobs. And the only way we're going to get out of this crisis is to spur economic growth and development. And with district elections without term limits, I think there's going to see the next generation of corruption in this city. And so I would like to request that the City Council consider and vote on whether or not they would support term limits as part of this process, which would ultimately maybe cause an amendment to our charter and a vote of the public. Given the proposed draft district map and likely alternatives, there are several questions that arise. Why should only 3 seats be up for re-election in 2020? How will those 3 districts fairly be selected out of the 6 districts drawn? Is this based solely on the 3 current council members whose term expires in 2020, and thus the district lines will be drawn accordingly based on where they reside? The next obvious question is if someone in one or more of those 3 district seats get re-elected, then one of the other seats who are currently overlapping with one or more of those districts will they automatically be unavailable to run for 2022? We're all aware of the conundrums you're all facing up there and this lack of democracy, as Nat speaks to. So how will all of this influence district lines? And therefore, shouldn't all 6 seats be up for re-election in 2020? Regarding the mayoral position, if that seat is on a different schedule than the other 6 council seats, then a sitting council member could run for mayor without losing their council seat should they lose the mayoral race. Is this a good thing or a bad thing for Richmond? Or should the mayoral position go up at the same time as the other 6 seats? This again touches upon term limits and what do we really think is in the best interest of Richmond, and it's not going to be what's going to create more corruption or the potential for more corruption in the city. I think it's imperative that the city provide workshops for the residents to adequately learn the tools provided on the website to draw their own maps, if that's really going to be a part of this process. So I feel for you. Nobody wants to vote themselves out of office or draw district lines to do that. The same way you speak to democracy, none of us want our property taken away from us or being told what the rules are on our property. So now you all kind of feel what we feel when you're trying to force TOPA down our throats.
Joseph Puleo.
Joe Puleo, Richmond residents. I don't think any of us like being bum rushed into this thing. But let's make the best of it. I agree with Lisa Johnson. All members of this council, including the mayor, should be up for voting at the same time. Under this system, half the city votes every 2 years. The other half stays home. That's not creating a unified city. Let's take the opportunity to create a charter amendment. 2-year terms for mayor and all the city council. The city council and the mayor elected every 2 years as a unity. Doesn't matter if it's district elections or not. I also suggest that perhaps the city attorney can send a letter to the Walnut Creek City Council demanding that they have district elections. Maybe we'll get $30,000. Thank you.
Hey, Mr.
Scott
Mayor.
Rafferty.
Mr. Mayor. Hey, Joseph, I want to ask you and Lisa a question. After all the work that Eduardo, Demulus, and Tom I went through 2 years ago, walking all those precincts in that hot weather, now you think that we are supposed to give up our term in 2020 and run for re-election?
Yes.
You got to be out of your cotton picking mind.
They don't like walking, huh?
Scott Rafferty.
Well, there's a lot to cover in 2 minutes here, even if I don't respond to all the personal issues, and I won't. I would hope, and I understand that this is in process, that my petition can be put online where people can read it. It wasn't, as described, a 6-page form letter, but it is 32 pages, and I think it would have resolved a lot of the misinformation that has underlined some of the criticisms here. Single-member districts are an American invention from the 17th century. It's representative democracy. It was only gotten rid of by the so-called progressives in California in 1910 to get rid of Latinos and minorities from the city councils in California. It was part of Hiram Johnson's racially discriminatory election reforms that spread throughout the country, and it's been put an end to in most of the country since 1965. Now we find ourselves in Richmond, a very diverse community, but not one where minorities have equal political influence. And that is not about you. It's not about the people that run against you. It's about the voters. And the voters don't pick council people in this city. As Mr. Myrick said so articulately, you You have to kiss the ring. You have to be chosen. And the people that do the choosing, they don't choose women. And when this council appoints someone, for example, we as your attorney pointed out, I did my homework on racially polarized voting. Ms. Racinos was not the choice of the Latino community. Maybe your choice, but the strongest evidence of racially polarized voting is that the Latino community voted for Mr. Demos, or for Mr. Johnson. So this is about equalizing the voting power of the Latino community, and as I think the demographer has really nailed the importance of creating the majority Latino district, and other groups need to be respected and collected. I don't agree that you can split a community of interest among multiple districts. That's not consistent now with the new state law. Also, there has been there were a number of things I wish I could respond to. I do think the idea of having San Francisco-style transferable voting is a good one.
Mr. Mayor, I got a question too.
I have one,
Okay,
too.
your time's up, but we got a couple of questions. Go ahead,
Sure.
Councilmember Bates.
Happy to answer them.
Did you have an opportunity to look at and research the number of elected officials over the last 20 years that showed a wide diversity of our council? I recall like Myrna Lopez, Maria Veramontes, both Latino female, Irma Anderson, Lisa McIntosh, and Mendel Penn were all on the council at the same time. I can go on and on in terms of the ethnicity and the male personalities on this council. Did you look and see where Richmond has been widely diverse, probably more than any other city in the state of California?
Well, again, it's not about the incumbents. However, the point that you're making, and Mr. Gosney has done a chart very similar to the one that is at the back of my petition, which shows that as recently as 2012, a majority of this council lived in a neighborhood that was 3% of the population. And that is not representative of the voters of Belding Woods. They have never had a voice of their own. And so that's what this is about. It's about the voters, and it's about...
Are you suggesting that all of us as council members do not respond to the constituency at large, and that we only respond to the constituency of where we live? Is that your assertion?
My assertion is that I don't think you are accessible and fully knowledgeable about the places that are chronically underrepresented in this city, including Belding Wood, and including other neighborhoods in the inner city of Richmond that have been underrepresented.
Okay, well, let me just point out one other point. No matter what district you select, depends on where that person lives, does not necessarily mean that he's going to represent that entire district any more than we at large represent the whole city.
But it's representative democracy. I am glad to have, in my case, I guess, Mark Desaulniers here, Barbara Lee. These are people that represent...
No, Mark Desaulniers. That's how little you know about us. We got Mark. Yeah.
The entire city.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're both congressmen.
Okay.
You know that.
Fine.
Wow. Do your homework. Look at the map.
Wow.
Hey, look, let's stick to questions and answers,
Let me
okay?
just ask one last
I'm sorry, but
question. In terms of the foul districts, you already have what you perceive to be as a district that we should adopt, I assume. Is that correct?
Well, you need to adopt the majority Latino district, which is
Well,
fairly well defined. I'm encouraging you to fine-tune that, to listen to the community, but you need to take care of, first and foremost, the underrepresented protected group, which in this case is Latino.
I'm asking you again. You already have what you perceive as a 6 districts that Richmond should adopt. Is that correct?
A draft,
Well, that's
and
what-
only one of those is a safe white district.
Okay, well, you already got that. In the event that we change it from a different perspective, you are now prepared to file a lawsuit against whatever we come up that don't match your dictatorial district that you want.
No, it's not dictatorial, sir.
Well,
It's-
you're the one
it's-
making
it's
the
the law.
decision.
It's the law.
You are the one
as
that's
long as you
making,
follow
you're
the
the
law,
one
you're
that's
gonna be
carving
fine.
up the districts. We can have 6 different districts. All of them are compatible with each other. But you have your own district, and I'm just questioning and asking you, are you prepared to support whatever we come up collectively, or are you going to challenge us, and down the road, you're ready to file a lawsuit because we did not adopt what you wanted in your dictatorial position?
Sir, I can't answer that in the abstract, but what I can tell you is that this law was passed in 1965.
You're not answering my
and
question.
for 50-plus years, this city ignored it.
You're not
This
answering
city
my
is in
question.
violation of a federal law.
You're not answering
That's
my
not
question.
my doing.
I'm just asking. You
That-
have a
How
district
come
that you
you
want.
yourself?
Look, we need to get out of this arguing.
Okay.
If you got a question, answer it, but let's quit the arguing.
Sure.
Do you have something?
Yeah, I've got a couple.
Okay. Councilmember Mark and then Councilmember
And
Johnson.
Mr. Rafferty, I was.
I actually have one up too, just because you seem not to be able to see it, and it's understandable.
You're white
I'm not
dash
actually, I'm white Asian. This is what happens.
We'll get to you.
Mr. Rafferty, I have to say, I wasn't going to bug you this time, but you did mention my name and kind of twisted my words a little bit. And you're doing a great job of turning me against something that I actually philosophically agree with, so it's kind of interesting. But I did want to ask you, you used this example of Councilmember Johnson doing better than Councilmember Racinos, former Councilmember Racinos. I personally endorse both of them, but in that last election, among Latino voters or among Belding Woods voters, correct? You were mentioning that. That was your assertion?
Well, statistically, yes. He did
So,
better in...
so isn't that proof of what most of us are saying, which is that in Richmond, we're not racial in the same way. Richmond is Richmond. So Latinos vote for black people vote for Latinos, white people vote for black people vote for white. We just aren't that. We all grew up together. We all grew up with diversity. We all do not follow these rigid, old, racial, guidelines. So isn't the Johnson-Racinos situation that you just said an argument against this whole racialized districting that you're bringing forward?
No, it's an argument against what I keep hearing from the council is your defense that you are of different races. That's not the point.
But I'm
Whether
saying, but if
you
Latinos
are the
voters,
choice-
if Latino voters preferred a black candidate to a Latino candidate, isn't that their choice?
Hey, Councilmember Mark, nobody here is going to win an argument.
All right, that's fine. That's fine. Let me ask you one last question to Mr. Rafferty. How are you doing on getting back that $300,000 to our school district?
Let me tell you, because you need to know this. All these numbers that your demographer has provided, these are numbers from non-Section 2 cases.
Okay, you're not going to answer that. All right.
No, I am going to answer it, because this is personal, and I think I have a right to put some facts out on the table. I didn't charge $975 or whatever. My rate was much lower. But the fees that I could have claimed were $850,000. The number $330,000 was a number I proposed, and they could not believe. It was accepted automatically. So regard that as a $500,000 gift.
Oh, you're so
And
generous.
by the way, in the history of this state, until that settlement, no Section 2 case in the last 25 years has settled for less than $3 million in attorney's fees.
Thank you.
So
You're such a
if
good
that's where you want to
person.
go, that's where you're going to head. And you're paying your demographer more than $30,000. So why don't you put that out on the record too? But please, the one thing I would ask is not just my demand letter, but you can summarize, you can mediate to take all the obscenities if you need to, but put every public comment every public comment should be on the website. So it's not just going to you, it's that your community can react to it. And finally, I want to agree with Don Gosney. You want to save money? Take a look at your matching funds and your campaign contributions, because this is about getting money out of politics. Those matching funds have been benefiting incumbents and not Latinos. So this is an opportunity, as the costs of campaigning come down, to streamline, reduce, or eliminate matching funds and to reduce the campaign contribution limits. So there's plenty of economies that will come with this, including your election costs will fall by half on a recurring basis for the rest of the time. So there's a lot more than $30,000 to be saved here, and of course, democracy is priceless. And every time one of your school children goes to school in Richmond, they are benefiting from the settlement that ended 53 years of white rule over West Contra Costa Unified School District.
Okay. Got more questions for Mr. Rafferty?
And may I just, one more thing.
You're not finished yet.
Wait, you're answering questions.
You're answering
Councilmember
questions.
Johnson, did you have something?
Well, JL got to most of what I wanted to say, but as Mr. Rafferty stated, he said that this is personal, and you made a very personal statement about the only way you can get up here is by kissing a ring. And I just want to let you know, I didn't kiss anyone's ring. And there were several kings who held rings in front of my face, and I refused to kiss them. Me and my team back there, we beat those streets like a cheap Persian rug. That's how I got up here. The assertion that you have to kiss rings to get up here, I fully resent and take offense of, okay? I got here with no support from none of the major organizations or groups in this city. I got here from people power, not kissing rings, okay?
I think I make that pretty clear in my demand letter, how much I
Let's
respect
make it clear
that.
in this setting.
Yes, I was quoting from
Okay,
Mr. Myra.
Vice Mayor Choi.
You know, I have to kind of enlarge on what Councilmember Myrick and Johnson have brought up. One of the basic tenets of the whole reason for this is that people tend to vote for who they are. That's what you said the last time you came up here. Can you address that?
No, I don't think that's
That
something
is what you
I've
said the last
at
time
all.
you came up here. Yeah, you did. You
I
said
think
that
that
people
is-
tend to vote for their
No,
own.
they have distinct
said that.
interests.
No, you said that. You really said that.
If you would
Everybody here?
put the demand letter on,
He said that.
if you would put the demand letter on the website,
No, but you said
people
here
could
last time you
evaluate
were
these
up.
statements.
Excuse me. You said the last time you were up here.
Folks, come on, remember, you're not going to win an argument with Mr. Rafferty.
No, but it's
you got a
on the
question for
record.
him,
We all remember it. We all remember it. You said that that's one of the basic tenets. And in any case, can you answer for the fact that you don't care about Asian American people at all, even to give them their own designation in your letter? I mean, could you, okay, if you could do one thing, could you stop using white Asian as a way of defining a district? Could you please do that? Do you see the limitations of that?
Let me answer that in 2 points. First of all, there are 4 Asian majority districts. Actually, 2 of the jurisdictions have 2 Asian majority districts in San Ramon that I worked with the Asian. In that case, the Asian versus white, there's very clear racially polarized voting. They're based on my knowledge of West Contra Costa, Asians and whites in this area may not be as racially polarized. Frankly, you'll have to get your demographer to figure that out, because they do not have a majority precinct. I've been focused on the Latino, non-Latino.
That's fine, but what's with hyphening me together with Tom Butt here?
I would characterize that as most likely a coalition district.
See,
Just
that
like
is
you
a
have-
big assumption, because most of the single largest ethnic
It's
group
not-
here is Lao. No, it is. The
It's
single
not an
largest
assumption,
ethnic group
sir.
here is Lao, and that's a big assumption.
Okay, but they don't have a majority district. You can't draw a majority. You said so yourself earlier this evening.
I understand, but in your letter, could you see the value in giving them at least personhood there? Just as a
I gave
matter
you
of
personhood,
respect?
sir.
No, as the Asian person talking to you, you didn't.
Well, I don't appreciate your inference there, sir.
Well, you know,
It's not, it's your...
well, as a white,
put the demand letter and let people decide for
as a
themselves.
white man, I guess you would think that way.
Last week I was a white colonialist. So
Okay, I'm
You know, you probably didn't
I'm
stop
getting
that.
I'm getting used to, this is the problem with at-large elections in
Mr.
Richmond.
Rafferty,
Mr. Rafferty, just stop it with the hype.
exercise my prerogative as chair and ask for the next speaker to
Thank
come
you.
up.
Actually,
I think we're done with
he
him.
insulted me.
Hey, no, come on.
No, he
we're
did.
not-
He
we're not
insulted me
engaging in
by
insults.
making me invisible. I'm tired of
Councilmember, you're-
becoming invisible by white guys.
Take it out in the parking lot.
Okay, let's
go.
go. Just joking, just joking.
David Drisdale.
I don't play
All
like
right.
that.
I think we've established that Mr. Rafferty is the most unpopular person in the room.
Not
here
only
tonight.
that, he's a racist.
Point of order, we have 58 minutes and 4
Okay, let's
items. Can we
let's move ahead.
please move on?
Yeah, let's move ahead. Come on.
Hi. Mr. Mayor, I've been in this town longer than you have, just so you know. But I'd like to say that I am a protected voter, and my rights have been violated by Mr. Rafferty, and we should be doing something about that. On this thing, district or at-wide is good and bad in both aspects, but we should make the decision on that ourselves, and with good data as well, too. And I feel that we should go along with this just to save the money. But if we can, work with the state to bypass him and not pay him anything. Thank you very much.
Charles Smith. Followed by Jan Bignoni, Kabir Kapoor, Mike Parker. Please occupy the seats in front of the podium, please. Charles Smith.
My name is Charles Smith, and I've been up here before. When I came to Richmond, what they had and what they have always had is at-large elections. As a student of the politics of Richmond, I came to the conclusion that elections are won through mailers, which are extremely expensive, and at-large candidates are easily bought, and all you need to push a crooked agenda is 4 votes. Then along came the RPA, and I went to their first meeting in the city of Richmond. It took place at the Richmond Library, and they handed out a flyer, and they said that they wanted to empower the neighborhoods with district elections. And I immediately jumped on the bandwagon, and shortly after that, I was on the steering committee because of my enthusiasm and knowledge of Richmond. However, when the election was won by McLaughlin in 2004, all of a sudden the RPA decided that they wanted to empower not the neighborhoods, but the RPA, and we've seen that. Why I support district elections is because I'm a working-class, blue-collar guy. I want to see accountability. I want to see cost to run go down where the average citizen can run. I want to see the ability to run on foot where you can knock on doors and get elected. And I want to see the goddamn crooks of this city who have taken advantage of the voters for years out of here.
Don Gosney.
Damn, did I step in something here? Jesus. Sorry. You know, I work with a lot of groups and frequently tell them about this 3-photo series that I have. The first photo is of a sign on a post. The second photo is of that same sign, but the camera is pulled back to see a large wooden chair, a throne of sorts, under that sign. And then the third photo is pulled back even further to see the sign with the throne right underneath it and the body of the Reverend Jim Jones and the 913 people he murdered at Jonestown, my nephew being one of them. On that sign it says, "Those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it." It was just last year that Attorney Rafferty attacked West County School District, and they chose to go with district elections. The WCCUSD screwed up the public meeting part of the process so badly that the County Board of Education chastised them and made them hold 3 more public meetings, and then they screwed up those as well. and now Richmond is repeating history. Instead of working with people that went through this last year, they're reinventing the wheel, except it's not very round. By the way, don't seek advice from the school district because they're still patting themselves on the back for a great job they did. Aside from the mention in this agenda, where was the public notice? Did Richmond take advantage of any of the numerous social media sites to get the word out to the public about this, any of this, even that we're going to the district elections? Where are the translators in case we had the minorities that we're supposed to be protecting? And how late in the evening did this item start? 9:36 p.m. before the first public speaker. Working men and women can't show up here for meetings like that. It's the very people that ethnic districting is supposed to help. How did you reach out to them to get their input? And for that matter, what about the rest of the residents in Richmond? Was there a mailing? Were there posters? Did you work with any of the online newspapers to publicize this? No, did not. I was intimately involved with almost every aspect of this process a year ago and watched from a short distance as they made every mistake possible. They too ignored the public and the people that they might be able to help. This is the most momentous change in Richmond since we stole the land from the Native Americans. Maybe we should heed the advice on that sign before we affix a copy of it up above the council dais. By the way, those interactive maps that she referred to, they're great. They really are great. Problem is, you can't print them out with any clarity. You want to see where you live. You can't do that once you printed out that interactive map. In the school district, within 200 feet of my house, you got 4 school districts there. Except I can't tell from looking at that map which one I am in. Okay? Mr. Rafferty, I don't believe he cares. As he lied to us when he told us 2 weeks ago that we would not need to redraw the districts when the new census data comes in. She says differently. Who are you going to believe? Okay? And by the way, double check with the map that the Board of Education approved and then the one that came out of the judges' chambers after speaking to Rafferty. Not the same one at all. So who has control over that way that map actually looks?
Real quick question from Mr. Gosney.
Yeah.
You mentioned, learning from basically the district's experience already, but you said don't ask them. I'm just curious if you have examples of who we should reach out to make sure that we get that.
Here's an example.
Yeah.
I was involved with every single one, part of it. I attended every one of the meetings. I noticed all the errors. And so I can at least tell you mistakes not to make.
Okay.
And suggestions, especially taking advantage of social media, taking advantage of the online newspapers, whether it's the Richmond Standard or the Radio Free Richmond. I've got access to over 14,000 people with Radio Free Richmond. And don't put anything on your website and think that people are going to look for it because your website really sucks.
Yeah, no, people don't do that.
Yeah.
But no, I appreciate that.
And by the way,
I was literally trying to...
Mr. Rafferty's threat letter, I put it on Radio Free Richmond a month ago.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was made out, the public had access to it then.
Jan McNaughey.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. I'm Jan McNaughey. I'm a resident of Richmond, and I'm here as the president of the Richmond Neighborhood Coordinating Council. Richmond's had neighborhoods since 1963, I believe, or 68. I never get those numbers right. And we have 37 neighborhoods. We have a good way to divide things up. Our neighborhoods may be somewhat diverse, but they're somewhat the same. I live in a neighborhood that has changed over the years. We moved in that house in 1955, so neighborhood has changed quite a bit in that time. We're here as the RNCC, as my presidents of all my neighborhood councils that attend RNCC and I have contact with, to help you guys in any way to make this work well. We know who lives in our neighborhood. We know who is there. We can help you with that. One of the things I would really hope we could do after this is done, because I know we're on a time limit, because Mr. Rafferty sent that his letter to all of the neighborhood presidents, so we all know about it, knew about it right after you guys got yours pretty much. And so there was things in it that I went, this is kind of crazy, and I read it, and I said, well, okay, let me see how this works. So then I did a little research, and realizing that nobody has gotten around him, I said, I think we're kind of stuck here, people. We're going to have to go with this. But I would really hope that we could, because we're using 10-year-old census information. This city has changed in 10 years. And so I'm really hoping that we can go back again after this and maybe 20, 25, some weird number like that, and look at our districting and see if we're really in a good range or not. I know a lot of people that ran for city council last year that I really thought should have been elected, and I know that some of it had to do with who was voting and who wasn't voting and a lot of that things. But, I mean, I support whatever works for the people that live in the city. I think that's the most important thing we have to realize. Whatever you need for us to do, I can send emails out to every president. I can get every president involved. We can have them come to RNCC on the 18th of November, and I can get people there for that. If that works, we're open to do it. But we really want to support you in doing this and doing it right. I heard so much stuff about the West County Unified School District issues that I really want to see us do it correctly. We've got neighborhoods already figured out, so, you know, we just have to divide them up a little bit. But 37 into 6 is, you know, not a real even number, but I'm sure we can figure out how to make it work. So I'm here to support you in any way I can. Thank you.
Hey, quick question.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
All right.
Well, my question was actually for the consultant.
My question was actually for the public speaker real quick. Yeah. I was just going to say thank you and just yes to your offer. Email all the presidents to let the neighbors know, and I know you know there's those pockets of people that they know there's a city council, but not who or what happens, and their input is going to matter as much too.
Well, see,
I'm going to comment a little bit more on this process.
We know everybody, what neighborhood everybody lives in, because we got the letter too, so it's right in there. He's got your little stars where y'all live.
Oh, I'm sure he's dotted his I's and crossed his
it's all
T's in
kinds
his
of
letters, just not in the statements.
Yeah.
But, yeah, please do as much outreach as possible and let people know, because
Yes.
I'm not even confident that the majority of Richmond even knows this is happening.
Well,
it's just one of those things
One of
that's
the
just
hard
being
things
circled
is
around.
that our seniors and people who don't use the internet is not going to know about these things.
Exactly.
So we really have to find a way to get it out to all of them, and I think the neighborhoods is your best way. We have parks, we have recreation centers, we have lots of places we can post things, and we'll post as much as you need. Just let us know, and we'll do what we can.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
If it's related to her testimony, go ahead.
Well, it is kind of. I was just wondering, would we be able to make an agreement or reach some type of settlement towards where we could wait until the results from the new census data is in, or like what would be the implications of that?
You could certainly make that request of Mr. Rafferty. There have been some agreements reached in the Santa Barbara area where the potential plaintiff agreed to wait until the 2022 census. So that would definitely be something that you could ask Mr. Rafferty if he'd be willing to wait until the 2022 census when you had updated population numbers.
Okay, thank you.
But just to add to that, though, there could be other attorneys that come in and making the same claims as Mr. Rafferty, and they are not willing to, to make that agreement after all, basically, let's say we start the process again. Just throwing it out there, it's just a possibility.
And we would have to entertain them, although we would be in the middle of an agreement with another
That's
similar
correct.
case?
That agreement would only pertain to Mr. Rafferty.
When is the census?
The census is next.
We will get updated census information the spring of 2021. So they'll conduct the
that's
census
after
in
the
2020.
election.
Okay, let's keep going with our speakers here.
Kabir Kapoor.
I got a lot of stuff. Richmond Gadfly here. First, I want to point out it's good that Mark Wassberg isn't here for this because that would be a shit show. So ranked choice voting was explained wrong by the consultant. I'd like some time at the end of mine for y'all to ask me to explain that a little bit better. But I wanted to give a little bit of background about that because San Francisco uses it, Berkeley uses it, San Leandro uses it, and Oakland uses it. And then around the country, a lot of major cities use it. And the city of New York just had it on their ballot tonight, and they approved it like 72 to 28 or something, like approving to have ranked choice voting to elect their city council down the line. And the state of Maine voted on it a few years ago on the ballot, and they have it now. And it's good for winner-take-all systems. So Mr. Rafferty earlier was talking about American exceptionalism in democracy and single-member districts, but actually America has a very bad form of democracy compared to the rest of the world. It'd be far better to have a much more proportional form of representation that a lot of other countries in the world have. There's 3 countries in the world that have single-member districts, winner-take-all, that are elected, and 2 of them are parliamentary, and 1 of them's not, the U.S., and they're all governed by conservatives because they have minority governments running them. The United Kingdom, Canada just re-elected they don't have a conservative government, actually. They re-elected their liberal, moderate government, but still. And the United States has a minority Republican government running us because we don't have a parliamentary democracy. I wanted to ask, the questions I had were, so who does the redistricting after the census? So if you don't do the deal with Rafferty about that, which is probably not going to happen based on the conversation you just had, who does the redistricting after the census, and who does the approval of that? And to look at the possibility of not having city council members approve that, but have a independent citizens commission or community commission doing that, which is what the state of California actually has, and it's superior to a lot of other states that do it. And if you want to look into it, 538 did a deep dive on something called the gerrymandering project. That's on their website, and they have a podcast. I listened to the whole thing this weekend because I was doing hard research about this, because we were trying to argue for multi-member districts ranked choice voting, and we did all the research showing how single-member districts actually hurt a lot of female representation as well. So we wanted to have multi-members, but we can't have that based on the California Voting Rights Act. Also, I'm sick of this majority-minority conversation because, it's stupid, right? Like, when we become the majority, are we still minorities? Like, what do I like? And also, you are a white colonialist or colonizer, and I got questions for you. Will you work towards parliamentary democracy and proportional representation, since you care so much about minority representation? Because if you look around the world, that's how you have minorities represented in government. You don't do single-member districts. Are you willing to work on that? And the second question is, if we put it on the ballot, will you use some of that $300,000?
Your time's up.
I'm actually curious, in about 30 seconds, can you explain ranked choice voting, how it works in Oakland and
So
experience?
Oakland's a little weird because they have an at-large district, which is, he said it was moving out of mentioned, but San Francisco or San Leandro and Berkeley, they each have a district, and they have the mayor. And there are people running, and she said there's 6 people running in all, and it made it seem like they're running in all the districts. There's people running in each separate district. And then only the people living in that district rank the people there, and so the person on the bottom gets eliminated. So you rank the entire way, but the problem is the counties limit it. So I think you can only rank 3 in Alameda County and San Francisco. So you rank 3 of the potential candidates, and then they cut off the bottom person, the person with the least amount of first place votes, and their votes get redistributed. And you keep, and after that redistribution, they take the bottom person again, and they redistribute it until somebody gets 50.1%. You just have to get over a majority. So what happened in Maine, the congressional district, is one of the Republicans. They flipped from a Republican to a Democrat. The Republican got like 49 or 48.5%. The Democrat got like 47%, and the Libertarian or Independent got like a small percentage. But the Libertarian, the Independent, I think it was the Independent, got redistributed, and it went to the Democrat. So the Democrat got elected. That Republican took it to federal court and lost. It didn't make it up to the Supreme Court because it took it to the Maine Supreme Court, and they ruled on it and they shut it out. He said it's valid. It's constitutional. So that's something that we should at least move towards, because it's a step in the right direction. It's not a good enough step. I'd like multi-member districts, but that's changing California state law. So we can talk to Buffy and the governor about that, but they probably are not in favor of that because it hurts the Democrats. But at least move to ranked choice voting like the other cities in the Bay Area do. In New York, the largest city in the country, just voted to do tonight by an overwhelming
I just want to point out that the agenda item tonight is not about ranked choice voting. It says hold a public hearing to review the districting process for city council elections.
Talking about representative democracy, Tom.
Receive
Crazy
public
concept.
input. So let's try to keep on that track. If somebody wants to put ranked choice voting on the agenda for the next meeting, be my guest. But let's stick to the subject matter tonight. Okay, next speaker.
Mike Parker.
I think we should be clear how screwed up this whole process is. For instance, we're told we're going to have these terrific tools to be able to use, et cetera, and people can go out and do it. Maybe we can teach people how to use these tools. But guess what? People have to submit their maps within the next 2 weeks in order to be considered on this. Now, you're not going to have a campaign to reach out to a lot of people, teach these tools, and get people's input into that. The fact is that we're going through this process because it's an extortion. Give me $30,000 now, or give me $25 million or some other figure later. That's the process, and the council may have to give in to this extortion. And that's really too bad if the council does have to give into it, but at least we can use it as a sort of educational experience to know what we want and what we don't want, and then try to figure out how to get there. First of all, where everybody's clear, the proposal that's of district elections as put out there cannot possibly make this council more representative of protected minority, of protected groups, classes in this city. Everybody, the mayor is run at large, everybody else on here is a person of color, a member of a protected class. Secondly, it's a big step backward in terms of the whole conception of this, as everybody has pointed out, to our conception of building one Richmond, of actually fighting the racism that involves here. We succeeded considerably in fighting racism. We still have a long way to go, but what we have on this council is part of that process of fighting it, and we're going to back it up so that we can put more whites on this council. The single-member districts are not particularly democratic. In the United States, House of Representatives, for instance, single-member districts, over 80% of those are considered non-competitive districts. That's what happens with single-member districts. One person or one group establishes dominance in the district, and it's very hard to challenge them. What we need in this city and in this country is proportional representation, and that's forbidden if we accept and go through this process, any form of proportional representation. So we know we don't want, we need to think about that. We also know that this process does nothing for more women's representation. All the studies that are out there indicate that women do more poorly under single-member districts than they do in at-large elections. So, okay, I think, though, the worst thing is, in terms of this process and how we're handling it, is that the demand letter provides no evidence whatsoever of dilution of votes of a protected class. I could...
Your time has expired. And that was our last speaker.
I actually have a few questions I'd like to ask you.
Okay, ask a question.
Okay, so concerning single-member non-contested elections, what percentage of districts are considered non-competitive?
But, as I said, about 83% are considered non-competitive. That is that there's one party, one person, one whatever dominates in that, and they're not really competitive districts.
Okay, so if I heard you correctly, you said that in non-competitive districts, there's generally someone who gains power and maintains power?
Right, well, just think about what happens here. If somebody gets elected here representing a district, they have lots of influence about lots of things happening in that district. You know, all the trade-offs and other things get made. People move over, you know, and don't want to alienate this person, and so it's very hard to contest it. Incumbency is much more powerful in single-member districts than it is in at-large elections. It's not more democratic. I mean, there's certain advantages to it in terms of it. I understand that. I'm not going to get into that argument, but let's understand that it's not really more democratic. The thing is that there is no indication anywhere in his letter, and this is what I'm concerned with, and I'm going to ask the city to go and look at this again. He has provided not a single instance or case or piece of evidence in his letter that the Richmond elections, that the way they work, have diluted any protected class. In fact, there's allowed in Richmond, in the CVRA business, there's allowed this notion of coalitions. And that's exactly what's happened in Richmond. African Americans and Latinos, for instance. In his example, that, for instance, Latinos decided to vote for Demlas as opposed to Ada Racinos is a perfect example of what's going on in Richmond, but does not give him any evidence for his case. So I think we should be going through this extortion stuff, but we should be looking at trying to find some other attorneys who have actually pursued some of these cases and see whether there isn't an opportunity. Because we have, I think, the best case possible of any of the cities that I looked at in terms of this council, that we should be able to stop this process in its tracks all across the state where these guys get to just milk cities for money.
So,
Okay, thank you.
Well, actually, at-large elections are competitive. How could you make the district elections be competitive?
Well, district, if we could have ranked choice, if we could have multi-member districts, particularly, then they would be competitive. But that's also not allowed under this particular procedure that we're in. Ranked choice voting will help some, but not in single-member districts, not very well.
Okay, thank you. Is that our last speaker?
Yes.
Okay, I have a couple of comments from, first of all, from Councilor Willis and then Councilor Martinez, and then we need to wrap this up.
Yeah, real quick, to the consultant, could you go back to the map of the timeline again for the public hearings and the mapping process and when we need to adopt this? Okay. Initial district. Okay, yeah, so I'm just going to say it how it is. This is a grossly insufficient and rushed process. Now, I know the obstacles in front of us, and I'm not blaming anybody besides outside opportunists for this situation that we're in. But we're talking about changing the entire makeup of the city of Richmond and how it's going to be represented moving forward. We've only had 10 people in this council meeting speak today, and barely any of them gave any comments on how the map should be drawn, and the map suggestions that were made need to be taken up for another time, or they're not allowed under this settlement. So, and us as council members are still grasping what this means moving forward in the timeline, so it's very inadequate and unrealistic to get a good snapshot on what is the appropriate way to draw these lines, and it's irresponsible to do that. I do not support this timeline. I don't know if I have a choice, but I don't support it because it's unfair to the city of Richmond. It's not right, and this isn't going to increase democracy. This is dictating how democracy is going to be moving forward, like it or not. To think that we're going to get a strong percentage of the 110,000 people that live in Richmond's perspectives, drawing maps on a very detailed yet very complicated website that's going to take me 5 hours just to understand completely, and then I'm still probably going to learn, along with the people that don't have internet access, along with the people that may be monolingual speakers who don't speak English. This isn't inclusive. This is being rushed. I don't know what can be done. I don't want this process to be rushed, so I put it out to folks to make sure you do as much outreach as possible, get as much input as possible, but even then, this is rushed, an inadequate process, and if anything, this contradicts the whole purpose as to why we were being demanded to do district elections to begin with, and I'm frustrated all the time. Nope, I'm almost done.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So yes, that's what I was going to say before he wanted to pull the Sandman on me on the Apollo. But yes, but yeah, thank you for bringing this timeline up. But to staff and city manager, is there any way in the budget that we can figure out how to have multiple town hall meetings that's more comprehensive than an evening city council meeting with other agenda items to get community input? Because this isn't going to work.
We could certainly schedule a workshop at a community center or an all-day or half-day workshop, if that would be the city council's pleasure.
Honestly, we would need like 2 or 3 of these, but for myself personally, yeah, I would like to see that. Actually, it needs to be, we probably should have six workshops in the drawn-out lines of the districts that are being proposed if we're really going to get a comprehensive swath on how these districts are going to be drawn out, because this isn't nothing but a money-making scheme. This isn't, I know, but this isn't democracy. This is a dictatorship at this point, and we're being told to either go with it or get sued and potentially be in more financial troubles than the city of Richmond's already in, which is exploitation because, yeah. Sorry, venting, but what were you saying, Mr. City Manager?
I don't know what the turnout would be at such a workshop, and I don't know whether those residents would be more or less engaged than those who were here at the council meetings.
Only one way to find out.
Yeah, I mean, part of that town hall meeting definitely would need to be an education on what this is, a good education, and then after that, some input on how the people want to see this gets mapped out. But yeah, we need multiple of these. It's not enough to have one. I don't want that to be off the table, but I do want it to be something that staff and my colleagues think about, because if we're really going to get input on how these maps are going to be drawn, December 3rd and 17th and then adoption of the map is grossly insufficient to be able to get that type of input.
Look, I just want to point out, look, nobody likes it. Nobody likes Mr. Rafferty.
It's not the point.
Nobody likes what we're doing.
It's not the point I was
Nobody
making.
likes the schedule. But last meeting, we voted to adopt this schedule and to do this. And you have something, James?
I was just going to add that the schedule is what we prepared as a draft. I mean, it is up to the council. We've always indicated that it's a tentative schedule, and the council can modify it. There are a couple of parameters that we have to stick to. The main one being that we have to have the ordinance, the second reading occur by January 20th. So it's that timeline. So we used our regularly scheduled council meetings in order to develop this schedule. But we always said, in fact, we say next steps, we're interested in suggestions that you all have for additional public engagement. So I just want you to be aware of the parameter, the main date being the January 20th date. But there's certainly opportunities within this timeline to change these dates around a bit or to add workshops, but there are, some constraints, and there's also, obviously, there's holidays.
I think if you all wanted to add a workshop, we could vote to do it tonight, If you want to do it, somebody make a motion, let's do it or not do it. Let's quit talking about it.
Yeah, well, then, okay, yeah, there's no other questions from my colleagues. I'll be the one to make a motion that we have two workshops before January 20th to get comprehensive input. I would suggest that they would be anywhere between 3 to 4 hour workshops, because you're not going to get a lot done in 2 hours and people are going to feel rushed.
Melvin, can we do 3, north, south, and central?
Please, friendly amendment.
Friendly amendment, 3,
yeah.
Just because I know some of the main places where people of color live. We divide the city up formally into neighborhoods, but north, south, and central, I want to make sure that those 3 areas are engaged around this topic. And I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, and actually, I'll accept that friendly amendment, and just for staff to think logistically, it won't get hammered out now, but me personally, I wouldn't want to see just translation equipment to get monolingual speakers to participate. If they have to be done in the same workshop, fine, but then monolingual speakers should be separated so they can have as much comprehensive input as opposed to someone just talking in their ear.
Let me suggest that they've got these 2 hearings tentatively set for December 3rd and 17th. Instead of doing those and then having 2 4-hour workshops for a total of 8, why don't you just turn those into workshops and allocate 4 hours for them?
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to it.
Well, I am, because it doesn't.
Go ahead.
Well, just to be clear, though, by that time, we have to have the maps submitted. So so the map submissions must take place by November 21st.
Right, which means that we need to have meetings before the maps.
Yeah, but Mayor Butt, may I make a point?
Yes, go ahead.
My experience is that drawing the maps is going to be very complicated, as Councilmember Willis has suggested. and time-consuming task, and I actually believe the workshops will be more productive if you have some draft maps for people to react to at the workshops. I don't think you're going to have a successful workshop where you're trying to have everybody in the room draw the maps in that workshop. That 2 weeks.
Well, I believe that we need a workshop to train people how to draw those maps. Otherwise, we're not going to get the maps from our constituents.
Could we use the November 18th Richmond Neighborhood Coordinating Committee that they were just invited to as an opportunity to invite the different neighborhoods out to learn how to use the toolkit? That way they can go back to the various neighborhood councils. That way they can go back to the various neighborhood councils and coordinate in their communities.
I'm amenable to. So I'm amenable to that. I won't be here, but it's not about me, you know. But yeah, sure.
So where are we? We had a suggestion, well, we had a motion, I heard, for 2 extra workshops.
Yeah.
And I suggested we turn the December 3rd and 17th hearings into workshops. Then I heard, let's have another workshop to teach people how to do the maps. I mean, what do you guys want to do?
I can agree with the December 3rd and 17th meeting being used as workshops. We should, I would hope that we would have a workshop given this information before November 26th to really do the draft mapping, and also in addition to that, just a blank map on how people would want to draw up if they have their own ideas based on what they see. It's just, I mean, this whole timeline is impossible is the thing. It's just, it's not feasible to get comprehensive community input. I'm trying to work around the BS here.
Well, you want to do a workshop on the 12th?
Can I try to?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor. So, I mean, and first of all, I just have a question. When you're talking about doing the December 3rd and December 17th, those are scheduled as hearings as part of the council meetings right now. Is that correct? So we're suggesting that it wouldn't be the council meeting. It would be a separate meeting that would be in the community, right? It wouldn't be here at City Hall. So those dates can change, correct? So those dates we would be looking at, or maybe I should be asking Councilmember Willis because it's your motion. Those dates would be changed. They wouldn't necessarily be on the 3rd or the 17th.
I would ask the city manager because it was one of his suggestions, so logistically that'd be a good question for him.
But is my understanding of that correct, that it would no longer be during the council meetings, there
Well,
would be
you can do them
separate
both
meetings?
at the same time. You can notice it as a public hearing.
No,
And you can set up 4 hours for it, and you can have all kinds of.
But I just want to make sure it's not the same time as council meetings, because we have council business to handle too. And I think those things should be separate. And as folks have said, I think they should happen in the community.
We could start early.
True.
Right, but they could also just.
It's not going to happen here.
Yeah.
It's not happening in that Civic Center class.
Right, but all could happen. But anyway, so Mr. Falk, is my understanding of that correct?
Yeah, you're trying to solve for a whole bunch of different constraints all at
Right.
once here, and I think the mayor has a good suggestion. Maybe you start those meetings on December 3rd and December 17th early. Start them at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock.
But why does it have to be during a council meeting?
Yeah,
That's what
people
I'm
do
trying to
have
understand.
work during that time too.
And it shouldn't be here. I mean, several speakers have talked about how it should be in the community. So, I mean, I guess what I'm suggesting, and if that's fine with the maker of the motion, is that we would have 2 meetings. We can give staff leeway for what dates they want to do those meetings, but they would not be council meetings. They would be public meetings.
Right.
At Nevin Center or wherever people decide is
But
appropriate.
would they be the 2 required public hearings? Or would we do those on council meeting nights, which means now we're talking about 4 hearings instead of 2?
Okay.
Yeah,
That's fine.
This is a major thing. It needs all of our attention.
And then the meeting and the council would probably be shorter because the public would be at the larger
Right.
ones.
And also the people that couldn't make it earlier in the day could have an opportunity to show up in the evening
Right.
to get additional
So
input.
does that make sense, Mr. Falk?
Well, one of the challenges here is that the Richmond City staff is not competent with the software ourselves. We've never done this exercise. I think we need help from the consultant to help run these workshops. They're experts in the demographic mapping. So I think we need to work with a calendar where they can be there to assist and train people on how to use the mapping software, if that's what you're looking for. So,
I mean, but I thought we had, well, I mean, in 2 weeks, I just don't see any of us, myself included, gaining the competency. I actually thought the idea of people actually will be able to respond better to multiple drafts to deal with, because that way we get the technical stuff off the table, and we can actually deal with actually grokking how it looks in our community.
Right, and just to make it clear, those maps have to be submitted by the 21st of November.
And they're just drafts.
And they're drafts, so we have all kinds of different drafts to choose from. So if you want a workshop on utilizing the tools to draw those maps, that has to occur very soon.
Okay, maybe that's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen. Okay.
At least my main goal as just the maker of the motion is we're not going to be able to deal with the map thing. That's a done deal. But at least getting as much comprehensive public input on this process before we make a final decision. So if it's 2 additional workshops alongside with us having our regular public hearing, I am happy to see that. I'm seeing 3 from my colleagues. I'm amenable to it. So
What's your motion,
yeah.
2 or 3?
Friendly amendment from the seconder is 3, and I accepted it.
Okay. All right.
All right, let's
Where's the
vote.
location?
Okay.
To be determined.
Actually, I have a statement to make before we vote. Is that possible?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. The last time I felt like this was when I had a gun pointed to my chest and someone taking a wallet out of my pocket. Now, I understand I'm in the same situation now, and he's going to take my wallet. But we need to make sure that other people don't suffer because of the situation that I'm in terms of making a decision about this. And I would like to direct staff to look into whether or not state law actually does supersede our city's charter, because Rafferty's logic doesn't hold. And I haven't seen any evidence to show that, that it does supersede our city's charter. I'd also like staff to consult locally available talents, such as the Haas Institute, for help in determining Richmond demographics. Of course, I do want to avoid threatened litigation. You know, he's already got his hand in my pocket. I might as well let him take it. But we need to make sure that our constituents at least have a voice, and that's why I think we need to have more hearings. So there's a motion on the floor.
There's a motion on the floor. Anybody else want to speak to it?
I speak to the issue. I think we're making a mistake when we say we're going to go in the community. The question then is which community? You got, what, I think Jan indicated 19 neighborhood councils. Now, where 30, where are you going to go? You're going to alienate. So I think with the technology that we have, probably it should be here at City Hall where the maps and everything can be visualized to the audience. There's another question that I'd like to raise. No matter what we come up with is going to be probably challenged by Mr. Rafferty. I would suggest that this council work together to come with maybe 3 alternative district proposals and put it on the March ballot. Let the people make a decision, because if this council make a decision, the first thing Rafferty going to do is challenge it, and we're back in the court, and we're back in a legal liability. If the people look at the 3 alternatives that we have, or 2 alternatives, whatever we come up with, and they make that decision, I think that is far more important and defensible than Mr. Rafferty with his dictatorial attitude of what he wants as opposed to what the people of the city of Richmond want.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Let's vote
Well,
on
what
that.
is the motion?
The motion was to have 3 town hall meetings.
Okay. Well, I'd like for the staff to follow up on my, and the consultant, on my suggestion. We do have a primary election in March, is that correct?
It's too late to put anything on the ballot.
Some clarification, is the motion to have 3 town hall meetings on mapping before January 20th?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
What's the deadline for the March?
Okay, let's vote.
Councilmember Bates? Councilmember Bates? It's a manual vote. I'm sorry, our voting system is
For three,
very slow tonight.
for three,
Councilmember Bates?
yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Martinez? Councilmember Myrick?
Yes.
Councilmember Willis?
Yeah.
Vice Mayor Choi?
Yes, but what's with ask me later?
Mayor Budd? Mayor Budd?
You know, I'm going to vote no because I think that what's going to happen is all these town hall meetings are going to get in the way of actually getting the job done. And, you know, our consultant only has so much time, our staff only has so much time. You know, our consultant has to have these initial maps done by November 21st, which is like a week and a half from now. And then, you know, and then we got to work. I mean, I think that we can either spend our time trying to get the council to agree on a map, or we can spend our time having town hall meetings.
Well, you outvoted.
I was going to say it's already
no,
happening.
I'm just telling you why. All right, so.
Councilmember Martinez?
Let's go.
Actually, when the argument's made that when the people we represent is getting in our way, I have to say yes, because I believe we're here to represent the people, and we can only
Item
do that by
passes.
listening to what the people have to
Let's
say.
go.
Okay, and the motion passed with Mayor Butt voting no.
Motion carries. So, folks, at this time, the public hearing is concluded on this matter.